Silenus the satyr had always prided himself on three things: his magnificent goat legs, his ability to drink anyone under Mount Olympus, and his absolutely legendary success with woodland creatures. Unfortunately, it was precisely the third talent that landed him in his current predicament, namely, being transformed into a busty blonde nymph by one very angry moon goddess. It had started as such a lovely morning, too. Silenus had been practicing his flute, and by practicing, he meant showing off to a group of giggling dryads when he spotted the most beautiful deer he'd ever seen drinking from a crystal stream. Being a satyr of simple pleasures and even simpler thinking, he'd immediately begun pursuing the deer with romantic intentions that were admittedly highly inappropriate for woodland wildlife. What he hadn't realized until it was far, far too late was that the deer was actually Artemis herself, taking her morning constitutional and animal form. The transformation had been swift and utterly humiliating. One moment, Silenus was a hairy, confident satyr with impressive horns. The next, he was staring down at a pair of, well, let's just say the goddess had been very thorough in her curse. Golden blonde hair cascaded past newly smooth shoulders, and where once had been goat legs were now the most perfectly formed human legs he'd ever seen, though he was trying very hard not to look. Perhaps Artemis had said with divine smugness, "A few decades as a nymph will teach you some respect for feminine virtue." Oh, and Silenus, the goddess's smile turned positively wicked. "Your name is now Selena. Try not to lose your purity, dear, because if you do, this charming form becomes permanent, forever. I do so love poetic justice." And with that, she'd vanished in a shower of silver light, leaving behind one very confused former satyr and the sound of woodland creatures snickering in the bushes. If Selena had thought being a satyr was complicated, being a nymph was like trying to navigate the labyrinth blindfolded while juggling flaming torches. Within hours of her transformation, she'd already encountered 3 different gods, 2 centaurs, and one extremely persistent river spirit, all of whom seemed to have suddenly developed an intense interest in her newfound feminine charms. "This is ridiculous," she muttered, dodging behind a particular large olive tree as Apollo himself came prancing through the grove, lyre in hand and that insufferable golden glow surrounding him like a divine spotlight. "I used to be the one doing the chasing." The irony was not lost on her, though she was far too busy running to appreciate it properly. Her new form, while undeniably attractive, curse Artemis and her attention to aesthetic detail, was proving to be more of a liability than an asset. Every step sent her golden hair bouncing in ways that made woodland creatures stop and stare. And don't even get her started on the physics of running with her new ... proportions. The worst part? Artemis's final condition echoed constantly in her mind. Permanent. If she lost her virtue, she'd be stuck like this forever. No more satyr life, no more masculine form, just an eternity of dodging lovesick gods and titans. "Beautiful nymph," Apollo called out in that annoyingly melodic voice of his. "Wait, I have composed 17 sonnets about your radiant beauty. The 18th is nearly finished. That's what I'm afraid of." Selena called back, vaulting over a fallen log with surprising grace. Being a nymph apparently came with natural athletic abilities, which was something at least. The next few days blurred together in a constant stream of narrow escapes and increasingly creative hiding spots. Selena learned that caves echoed footsteps, bad for hiding from gods with excellent hearing, that flower crowns were apparently irresistible to certain types of nature spirits, who knew, and that her new voice had a tendency to do this breathy, sultry thing when she was nervous, which only made matters worse. She'd just managed to lose a particularly persistent satyr, the irony was killing her, by diving into a river and swimming downstream when she overheard a conversation that made her divine blood run cold. Oh yes, one naiad was saying to another as they lounged on some rocks, Zeus has been asking about the new blonde nymph. Apparently, he's quite taken with her, the one that's been running all over creation. The other Naiad replied, examining her fingernails with practiced boredom. I heard she outran Apollo yesterday. Impressive, really. Zeus asked Hermes to find out her name and where she lives. The first Naiad continued conspiratorially. You know what happened to the last nymph Zeus took a liking to? Selena didn't stick around to hear the rest. She burst from the water like a golden torpedo and ran for the hills literally. Zeus, Zeus, the king of the gods, notorious for his appetites and his complete inability to take no for an answer. If Apollo was a nuisance, Zeus was a natural disaster with a crown. And with Artemis's curse hanging over her head, Zeus wasn't just dangerous, he was potentially her permanent doom. For 3 days and nights, Selena ran. She sprinted through forests, leaped over streams, and climbed mountains with the desperate energy of someone who knew exactly what Zeus's interest entailed. Her new nymph instincts seemed to know all the best hiding spots, but even they couldn't keep her hidden forever from the Lord of the Sky. She avoided populated areas, gave temples a wide berth, and generally tried to become as invisible as possible. But gods had their ways, and Zeus had the entire heavens at his disposal. On the 4th day, exhausted beyond measure and running purely on divine adrenaline, Selena finally found what looked like a safe spot. It was a secluded cliff overlooking a pristine valley, far from any major paths or temples. The area felt peaceful, untouched by divine drama. Finally, she panted, collapsing onto the soft grass near the cliff's edge. Maybe I can actually rest for 5 minutes without some god trying to. She never finished the sentence. The sky above began to change, shifting from clear blue to a strange, shimmering gold. At first, Selena thought it might be sunset, but the light was wrong, too metallic, too purposeful. Then it started to rain, but this wasn't ordinary rain. Golden droplets fell from the suddenly aureate sky, each one gleaming like liquid sunlight. The rain seemed to fall only on her, creating a perfect circle of golden precipitation that sparkled and danced in the air before touching her skin. Selena sat up, blinking in confusion as the warm golden drops landed on her arms, her face, her hair. The rain felt strangely alive, almost intentional. It didn't soak her like normal water. Instead, it seemed to caress her skin with an otherworldly warmth that made her shiver despite the pleasant temperature. Something nagged at the back of her mind, a half-remembered story, a myth she'd heard whispered among the nymphs. Something about a mortal princess locked in a tower by her father, and how he had come to her cess. Oh no, she whispered, her eyes widening in horror as the pieces clicked into place. Oh no, they know. He turned into golden rain for Dano, but the realization came too late. The golden shower was intensifying, and with each passing moment, she felt stranger, more lightheaded. There was a divine power in this rain, ancient and irresistible, and all her running had been for nothing. What is this stuff? She whispered to the empty air, her voice small and confused and utterly, adorably clueless about the true nature of the divine seduction currently raining down upon her, even as the terrible knowledge of Danae's fate danced just out of reach in her panicked mind.